You ever see someone get laughed at so hard it almost feels like the whole street turns against them? Yeah, that's exactly what happened that morning. And I'll tell you right now, nobody on that block was ready for what came next. There was this old man. Name was Leonard Hayes. Folks around here just called him Lenny. 68 years old. Same worn jacket every winter. Same spot on the corner of Maple and 3rd for over 3 decades. And that morning, he did something that made everybody stop, stare, and then laugh like it was open mic night. He taped a crooked little sign to the side of his hot dog cart. For sale. Now, I'm not talking about some trendy food truck with string lights and a social media account. I mean, this thing looked like it had lived 3 different lives already. The paint was peeling off in long, tired strips. The metal had that dull gray color like it gave up shining years ago. And the wheels. Man, I swear one of them squeaked louder than the city bus brakes. And right across the street, you had the newer vendors, guys like Rick Dalton. Not the movie star, just a loudmouth with a shiny burger stand and too much confidence. And his crew. Rick took one look, let out this sharp laugh, and said, "Hey Lenny, you selling that thing or donating it to a museum?" The others chimed in right away. "Man, I wouldn't take that if you paid me. That cart got more miles than my uncle's pickup. Probably haunted too." And Lenny, he didn't snap back, didn't argue, didn't even fake a smile. He just stood there, one hand resting on the edge of that old steel counter like he'd done 1,000 times before. Quiet. Almost like he was listening to something nobody else could hear. You gotta understand something. That cart wasn't just a cart. That was his whole life. I've been around long enough to remember when Lenny first rolled it onto that corner. Back when Maple Street wasn't full of neon signs and overpriced coffee. Back when people actually talked to each other while waiting in line. Back then, the cart looked different, brighter, cleaner, and there was always this woman beside him. Her name was Rosa. Now Rosa, she had this way about her, you know, not loud, not flashy, but the kind of presence that made people slow down. She remembered names, remembered orders, remembered things about your life you forgot you even told her. And Lenny, he wasn't much of a talker, even back then. But when he looked at her, you could tell. That was his whole world right there. Together, they built that corner into something more than just a place to grab lunch. It became, I don't know, like a checkpoint in people's lives. Construction workers, office folks, high school kids skipping class, they all stopped there at some point. And Rosa, she had this habit. If she saw someone hanging around too long, looking a little too thin, a little too quiet, she'd call them over like it was no big deal. "Hey, sweetheart, you look like you could use a hot dog." And if they said they didn't have money, she'd wave it off. "Then today it's on me. Tomorrow you can pay it forward." She never made a show of it. Never told anyone. Just did it like breathing. And Lenny, he never stopped her. Not once. But life, it doesn't really care how good you are. About 8 years ago, Rosa passed. Just like that. One illness, quick and cruel. And suddenly that corner felt different. Lenny kept the cart running. Sure. But the laughter faded, the lines got shorter, and the city changed around him. New vendors came in, younger, louder, flashier, food trucks with branding and menus that needed explaining. Guys like Rick didn't just want business, they wanted territory. And Lenny, well, he didn't fight for it. Not because he couldn't, but because he didn't seem to have it in him anymore. You could see it in the way he stood, shoulders a little lower each year, the way he leaned more on the cart than worked it. And then there was the money. Rent went up, supply costs went up, customers went down. And Lenny's body, it just couldn't keep up. I remember one night, I was closing up my shop across the street. He didn't know I was there. He stayed behind after everyone left, just standing by that cart under the dim streetlight. He ran his hand slowly across the counter, like he was reading Braille, like every scratch told a story. And then he said something, real quiet. "Rosa, I think I'm done." That wasn't a business decision. That was a man letting go of the last thing tying him to someone he loved. So yeah, the next morning when that for sale sign went up, it wasn't just about selling a cart. It was about surrender. And the worst part? Nobody around him understood that. To them, it was just a joke. Rick even leaned over his grill, flipping a burger, shouting loud enough for half the block to hear. "So what's the price, Lenny? Scrap metal or sentimental value?" A couple of guys laughed. One even clapped. And for a second, just a second, I thought Lenny might finally say something. But he didn't. He just nodded slightly, like he accepted it. Like maybe, deep down, he agreed with them. And that's when something strange happened. Right when the laughter was at its loudest. Right when Lenny looked like he was about to pack it all in. A car pulled up. Not just any car. I'm talking polished black, quiet engine. The kind that doesn't belong on Maple Street unless it's lost. And just like that, the laughter slowed. Then stopped. Doors opened. And a man stepped out. Clean suit. Calm face. The kind of presence that doesn't need to say much to be noticed. He looked around once, took in the block, the vendors, the cart. And then, he walked straight toward Lenny. No hesitation. No doubt. Just purpose. And right there, in the middle of that worn-out sidewalk, with everybody watching, he asked one simple question. Is this cart for sale? And I swear, the way Lenny looked at him in that moment, it was like something inside him shifted. Just a little. Lenny didn't answer right away. He just stood there, eyes narrowing slightly, like he was trying to figure out whether this guy was serious or just another person about to turn him into the punchline of the day. The street had gone quiet in that strange way, not silent, but waiting. Rick leaned forward from across the street, flipping his spatula slowly, watching like it was free entertainment. Yeah, he muttered under his breath, loud enough for the guys next to him. Let's see how this one plays out. Now the man in the suit. He didn't rush, didn't repeat himself, just stood there, hands relaxed at his sides, like he already knew the answer mattered. Finally, Lenny cleared his throat. Yeah, it's for sale, he said, voice low, worn. But I'll be honest with you. It's old, nothing special about it. A couple of snickers broke out behind him. Rick chuckled, hear that? Even he knows. But the man didn't even glance their way. He smiled, just a little, and said something that made the air shift again. Yeah, I figured you'd say that, but I don't think you're right. Now that got people's attention. Even Rick stopped mid-motion. Lenny frowned slightly, not offended, just confused. The man stepped closer, resting his hand gently on the edge of the cart, almost the same way Lenny had done the night before. You mind if I ask you something? He said. Lenny nodded slowly. There used to be a woman here. Years ago, she worked this cart with you. Lenny's fingers tightened just a little. Her name was Rosa. Rosa Hayes. And just like that, everything stopped. You ever see someone get hit with a memory so hard it's almost physical? That's what that looked like. Lenny didn't blink, didn't breathe, just stared at him. She was my wife, he said finally, voice quieter now, careful. You knew her? The man let out a breath, like he'd been holding it for years. Yeah, he said softly. Yeah, I knew her. And then, he did something nobody expected. He stepped back, looked at the cart, then at Lenny. And for the first time since he arrived, his composure cracked just a little. She saved my life. Now look, I've heard people say that before. Casually, like it's a figure of speech. This wasn't that. This was real. You could hear it in his voice, see it in his eyes. And suddenly, nobody was laughing anymore. Rick crossed his arms, squinting, like he didn't buy it. But he wasn't joking now either. Lenny swallowed. What do you mean saved your life? He asked. The man nodded slowly, like he'd been waiting for this moment, maybe longer than he realized. I was about 12, he began. Maybe 13. I don't remember exactly. Things were kind of blurred back then. He glanced down the street, like he could still see it. I didn't have a home, bounced around shelters for a while. Then just stopped going back. Streets felt easier, at least no one asked questions. The block stayed still, like the whole city leaned in. I used to come by here, not to buy anything, just to stand close enough to smell the food. He gave a small, almost embarrassed smile. You ever been so hungry that smelling something feels like eating it, just for a second? No one answered. They didn't need to. I'd stand right over there. He pointed to a spot near the curb, trying not to get noticed, trying not to get chased off. Lenny's expression had changed now, softer, searching. And then the man looked at him again. But she noticed. Of course she did. Anyone who knew Rosa knew that part already. She didn't yell, didn't ask questions, just looked at me and said. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice shifted, gentler, almost like he was quoting her exactly. Hey, you look like you could use a real meal. Lenny's eyes dropped. She handed me a hot dog, wrapped it up like I paid for it, gave me a drink. And when I told her I didn't have money, he shook his head slightly, smiling through it. She said, good, because today, it's not about money. A couple of people shifted uncomfortably now. Even Rick looked away for a second. That wasn't just one time, the man continued. It became a thing. I'd show up, she'd pretend it was nothing, like I was just another regular. And she talked to me. That part, he said slower. Not like I was broken, not like I was a problem, just like I mattered. Lenny pressed his lips together, hard. The man went on. She asked me about school. I told her I wasn't going, she didn't like that. He let out a soft laugh. Next thing I know, she's filling out forms, talking to someone on the phone, dragging me to an office, telling them I needed a shot. Lenny blinked, a tear forming now, but he didn't wipe it. She bought me supplies, shoes, books, things I didn't even know I was allowed to have. And every time I tried to thank her, she'd say the same thing. He looked straight at Lenny now. Don't thank me, just promise me one thing. When you get your chance, you help someone else. Silence. Heavy real, earned silence. The kind that doesn't need music behind it. Rick shifted his weight again. But this time, there was no smirk, no joke. The man straightened up slightly. I got that chance, he said. Took me years, a lot of wrong turns, but I got there. He gestured lightly to the car behind him. I built a business, couple, actually, nothing crazy, but enough. Then he looked back at the cart. But I never forgot where it started. Lenny's voice came out rough. Why didn't you come back sooner? That question had hung there. The man nodded slowly. I tried, he said. Came by once, maybe 5 years ago. But she wasn't here anymore. Lenny looked away, jaw tightening. I asked around, someone told me she passed. The man's voice lowered again. I didn't know what to say, so I left. A pause. But I didn't forget. And then, he took a step closer. Which is why I'm here now. Rick leaned in again, cautious. Yeah? And what's that supposed to mean? He called out. This time, the man did look at him. Not angry, not aggressive, just steady. It means, he said calmly, I'm buying this cart. A few laughs tried to break through, but they didn't land the same. Rick scoffed. For what? Nostalgia? You gonna frame it? The man shook his head. No. He turned back to Lenny. I'm buying it to rebuild it. Now that got everyone's attention again. Lenny frowned. Rebuild it. Yeah, the man said, nodding. Fix it up. New equipment. Fresh paint. Make it run better than it ever did. Lenny opened his mouth slightly, but nothing came out. And then, the man continued. You keep it. That hit different. Rick actually laughed again, but it was forced now. Yeah, right, he said. Nobody does that. The man didn't even acknowledge him this time. You won't have to stand out here all day, he told Lenny. No more back pain. No more worrying about expenses. I'll handle all of it. Lenny shook his head slowly. Why would you do that? And the answer came simple. Because this place, this cart. He placed his hand on it again. This is where my life started turning around. Lenny's eyes filled now fully. I can't repay her, the man added. But I can make sure what she built keeps going. The street stayed quiet. And for the first time, Rick had nothing to say. For a long moment, nobody moved. Not Lenny. Not the man in the suit. Not even Rick across the street, who, up until about 5 minutes ago, always had something to say about everything. It was like the whole block got caught between what it used to be and what it was about to become. Lenny finally exhaled, slow, shaky. You don't have to do that, he said, almost automatically, like the words came from habit, not belief. She didn't help people expecting anything back. The man nodded. I know, he said. That's exactly why I have to. Now that landed. Because it wasn't charity, it wasn't guilt. It was continuation. Lenny looked down at the cart again. Really looked this time. Not as something broken, not as something worn out, but as something that had history. Wait. You're serious? He asked. The man gave a small smile. I didn't pull up in that car to make a joke. And for the first time that day, Lenny let out a quiet laugh. Not big, not loud, but real. It cracked something open. Rick shifted again. Clearly uncomfortable now, like the whole script he'd been playing in his head got ripped away. So what? He muttered, trying to recover. You're just gonna turn that rust bucket into some kind of 5-star restaurant. The man glanced over, calm as ever. No, he said. I'm going to turn it back into what it was. Rick frowned. And what's that? The man didn't miss a beat. A place where people don't get turned away. That shut him up. Not dramatically, not with some big reaction. Just quiet. And sometimes, that's louder than anything. A week later, you wouldn't recognize that corner. I mean it. The cart. If you could even call it that anymore. stood there like it had been given a second life. Fresh paint, clean lines, new grill that didn't cough smoke like it was on its last breath, a quiet refrigeration unit that didn't sound like it was arguing with itself. There were lights too, not flashy, just warm, inviting. The kind that made you want to stop, even if you weren't hungry. But here's the thing. They didn't erase everything. They kept the shape, the feel, the soul of it. And right there on the front, same spot it had always been, was the name. Rosa's. Handwritten style, just like before, slightly imperfect, completely human. I watched the whole thing come together over those days. The man, his name, by the way, was Marcus Reed. He was there every morning, not in a suit this time. Just jeans, sleeves rolled up, actually working. And Lenny, he showed up too. At first, just standing off to the side, like he wasn't sure if he still belonged there. You could see it in the way he hovered, hands in his pockets, watching every detail like it might disappear if he blinked. Marcus noticed, of course. One morning, he walked over, handed Lenny a cup of coffee. "You're standing like a customer," he said casually. "That doesn't feel right." Lenny gave a small shrug. "Feels like it ain't mine anymore." Marcus shook his head. "No," he said. "It feels like you forgot." Lenny frowned slightly. "Forgot what?" Marcus looked at the cart, then back at him. "That this was never just yours to begin with." Now that might sound strange, but the way he said it, it made sense. "This place," Marcus continued, "it belongs to every person she helped, every person who walked away from here a little better than they arrived." He paused. "I'm just keeping it going. You're still part of it." Lenny didn't respond right away, but he stepped closer, and that was enough. Opening day came, quiet at first. No big announcement, no grand reopening banner. Just the smell. That same smell that used to drift down Maple Street years ago. And people noticed. One by one, they started coming back. Old faces first. A construction worker who hadn't been around in years. A woman who used to come by during her lunch breaks. Even a guy who said Rosa once helped him when he was short on rent. They all had stories. And they all said the same thing in different ways. "She helped me." And Lenny. He stood there, listening, eyes a little wider each time, like he was hearing pieces of his own life from angles he'd never seen before. Then came the new crowd. Curious people, drawn in by the clean look, the warm lights. And here's where it got interesting. Every now and then, Marcus would quietly signal to the staff, and a meal would go out, no charge, no announcement, no explanation, just like Rosa used to do. And Lenny noticed that too. He walked up to Marcus one afternoon, voice low. "You doing that on purpose?" he asked. Marcus smiled. "She did." Lenny nodded slowly. "Yeah, she did. And for the first time in a long while." He didn't look tired. "Now let's talk about Rick. Because people like Rick, they don't just disappear from a story like this." At first, he stayed quiet, kept to his side of the street, business as usual. But you could tell something was off. His place was still shiny, still loud, still him. But it didn't feel the same anymore. One afternoon, I saw him standing there, watching the line at Lenny's cart, longer than it had been in years. He shook his head, muttering, "People love a comeback story." But it didn't sound like an insult this time. More like confusion. A couple days later, he walked over. No audience, no jokes, just him. Lenny looked up, surprised. Rick scratched the back of his neck, awkward. "Hey, that alone was new. I might have, said some things." Lenny tilted his head slightly. "Couple," he replied. Rick gave a short, embarrassed laugh. "Yeah, well." He glanced at the cart, then back at Lenny. "Didn't know all that stuff about your wife." Lenny nodded. "Most people didn't." Rick shifted again. "She sounds like she was something." Lenny's expression softened. "She was." A pause. Then Rick said something I didn't expect. "You think she'd have fed me for free?" Now that had a little edge to it, but not in a bad way. More like he was testing something. Lenny looked at him for a second, then smiled, just slightly. "Only if you needed it." Rick huffed a quiet laugh. "Yeah, figures." He didn't apologize again, didn't need to. Sometimes, people don't change all at once. Sometimes they just stop being who they were. And that's a start. A month later, the corner didn't feel like a battleground anymore. It felt like a neighborhood again. And Lenny? He wasn't working the grill full-time anymore. But he was there, every day, talking, remembering, even laughing sometimes. And every now and then, when someone lingered a little too long, looking a little too unsure. He'd lean forward and say, "Hey, you look like you could use something to eat." Just like she used to. Now here's the part that sticks with me. And maybe this is where people will disagree. Because not everyone believes in this kind of thing. But I've seen enough to say it anyway. What Rosa did all those years ago, it didn't disappear. It didn't get lost or forgotten. It just waited. And when it came back, it didn't come back small. It came back multiplied. Not just in money or business, but in people, in second chances, in a corner of a street that almost gave up and didn't. So here's the question, and I really want to hear what you think about this. Do you believe things like that actually come back around? Or do you think this was just luck, timing, coincidence dressed up to feel meaningful? And more importantly, if you were in Marcus's place, would you have done the same thing? Or would you have just kept driving? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Because stories like this, they don't end on the street. They end with what people decide to believe about them.